Chapter 1591. After accompanying Gu Shengyin for a few days, He Lu returned to the army. Gu Shengyin returned home. Ever since he found out that his daughter had a boyfriend like He Lu, Chongming Gang's attitude towards Gu Shengyin had completely changed. When they chatted, He Lu was always the topic of conversation. The meaning behind her words was to persuade her daughter to quickly hook up with He Lu, this rare golden turtle husband. To be honest, every time Gu Shengyin heard such words, he would feel uncomfortable and flustered. The only thing Chongming Gang cared about was whether he could become in-laws with the He family. If that was the case, how much could he benefit from this marriage? He didn't even care if He Lu treated his daughter well. Fortunately, these days didn't last long. Gu Shengyin's uncle sent news. He said that everything was ready. Gu Shengyin knew very well what this meant. On Tuesday, the Chong Group held a shareholders' meeting. This meeting was initiated by Chongming Gang. It was about a major project that the Chong Group was about to start and needed the support of a majority of shareholders. In fact, such a meeting would usually be approved. After all, Chongming Gang was injured 25% of the shares, while Gu Shengyin had 30%. Just the father and daughter alone held more than half of the shares in the Chong Group. As long as his daughter was on his side, Chongming Gang could be said to be in an invincible position. Chongming Gang was very confident. After his wife died, he became his daughter's only family. Even if there were some disagreements in the past, how could there be overnight hatred between father and daughter? He never thought that there would be a time when his daughter would be at odds with him. Gu Shengyin was dressed very formally today. The pure black business suit made her look capable and experienced. Her hair, which was usually scattered behind her head, was neatly tied up. She looked like a strong woman who had been in the workplace for a long time. Because she was the largest shareholder, even if she was very young, her position was very high. This project was approved without a doubt. Chongming Gang smiled complacently. Just as he was about to announce the end of the meeting, Gu Shengyin suddenly stood up. "There's one more thing I need to discuss with you all." Chongming Gang frowned. Usually, this daughter of his would just sit there quietly without any sense of presence. What was she trying to do? Gu Shengyin looked around the room with a smile and said, "As a major shareholder of the Zhong Group, I think that Mr. Zhongming Gang is too old to be the head of the Zhong Group. Now, I propose that Mr. Zhongming Gang be dismissed from his position in the Zhong Group. I, Zhong Yuji, will take over his position." A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The hundreds of shareholders below were discussing animatedly. However, if someone observed carefully at this moment, he would find that many major shareholders who held a lot of shares of Chong's group were very calm when they heard the news, as if they had already known what would happen. As for Chongming Gang, his face had already turned ashen when Gu Shengyin said her first sentence. By the time Gu Shengyin finished speaking, his face had completely darkened. "Zhong Yuji, what do you mean?" he questioned. Gu Shengyin looked back at him without dodging. "Father, you're old." Chapter 1592. Chongming Gang only felt a surge of anger in his heart. He had guarded against the Lu family, but he didn't expect that his daughter would do such a thing. He turned around and said coldly, "I don't agree." He raised his voice and said, "Although Yuji is my child and the largest shareholder of the Chong Group, she has never learned anything about the business world and has no experience in handling company affairs. Taking over the company rashly like this won't do any good to the development of the Chong Group." Gu Shengyin had long known that Chongming Gang would not wait for death. However, since she dared to say such words, she must have been fully prepared. "Let's vote, father." Gu Shengyin said calmly, "If more than half of the shareholders support me, father, you should give up your power." Chongming Gang looked at the shareholders who were discussing below. Even though he knew that Gu Shengyin must be prepared, if he agreed to her, he would obviously be in a passive position, but he couldn't say anything. He looked at the results of the vote with a cold face. It was expected. Chongming Gang looked at his old partners who had worked with him for many years. One by one, they voted for his daughter, and his vision turned black. He didn't know if he should be angry, or because he despised the so-called friendship in the business world. Gu Shengyin didn't have a smug smile on her face. Instead, she said to Chong Ming-gang in a low voice, "Father, you can retire in peace. I will let you spend your old age in peace." Chong Ming-gang's mind was very dizzy, but he forced himself not to show anything. He sneered and said, "Then I'll see what you can do." He wasn't in a hurry at the moment. As long as his daughter really got the hang of it, she would find that managing a large listed company wasn't as simple as managing a small private studio. When the time came, she would beg him to go back. When the results were out, Chong Ming-gang snorted coldly. He didn't even say anything. He snorted coldly and left with a flick of his sleeves. The next day, the news was announced in the newspapers, financial news, and even social media. The Chong Group has changed. The young chairman has become the new leader. When An saw the news, she was having a facial massage with her friend at the beauty salon. The girl looked at the news on her phone and said in surprise, "Wen, your sister has become the president of Chong's Group." An Wen's face stiffened. She had always told her friends that her mother had married Zhong Ming-gang and she had become the young miss of the Zhong family. Nominally, she was Chong Yuji's sister. If she hadn't been chased out of the Zhong family, she would be flattering herself at most. However, the fact that she was chased out of the Chong family was too embarrassing. Therefore, An never told her friends about it. They thought that An had been living in the Zhong family all this time and was still the daughter of the Zhong family. Only An herself knew how guilty she felt every time she said those words. Seeing that An didn't say anything, her friend looked at her strangely. An could only say, "Ah. Is that so?" The girl asked suspiciously, "Wen, don't tell me you only know about this now?" An smiled awkwardly and didn't say anything. She really just found out about it. Chapter 90. There were also 10 chapters to be updated during the day and at night. More everyone, if you have tickets, please vote for Gao Lengji. If you have the ability, please give Gao Lengji a reward. If you can, please give Gao Lengji a full subscription. You can also use book coins to subscribe to the chapters that you bought with book coupons before. Thank you, everyone. There will be a second round of updates tomorrow morning. Recommended by Huan Chu, Transmigration System, Male God Strategy Guide, a very good transmigration novel. Chapter 1593. An Wen's reaction made her friend a little suspicious. An Wen suddenly became rich. In the past, she looked like an ordinary person who didn't have to worry about food and clothing. But 2 months ago, she suddenly started to wear branded clothes and spend extravagantly. Of course, she was very envious. After asking, An Wen proudly said that her mother had married a rich man and become a rich lady. As for herself, she had transformed into a pampered young lady of a wealthy family. When she saw An Wen's appearance, she also had doubts. But An Wen looked proud and even said that she would invite her to the Zhong family's villa to play if there was a chance, so her doubts were dispelled. But now, she started to have doubts again. If An Wen really became a rich lady of the Zhong family, how could she not know about such a big thing happening at home? How could she leisurely follow her out for a massage? An Wen's friend said tentatively, "Wen, you said before that you would take me to the Zhong family's villa to play when you have time. Then when do you think you'll be free? I've never been to the villa before." After she asked this question, her gaze was fixed on An Wen's face. Sure enough, after hearing her words, An Wen's face flashed with a trace of unnaturalness. She stammered and said, Let's talk about it another day. Right now, the family is very busy and I don't have time to entertain you." "You don't have time to entertain me, but you have time to take me shopping every day?" The girl sneered in her heart. She and An Wen were just ordinary friends. After An Wen suddenly became rich, she found a few opportunities to get close to her and slowly became good friends with her. She originally wanted to get close to An Wen because she saw that An Wen had become rich and wanted to use her to get to know a few rich young masters. But now, it seemed that things weren't as simple as An Wen said. At least, her identity as a rich lady was very problematic. The girl didn't say anything and continued to talk to An Wen with a smile. But when An invited her to have dinner together, she smiled and refused. Seeing An take a taxi and leave, the girl was even more certain of her guess in her heart. If she really became a rich lady, would she not even have a car? The girl called another friend of hers. Since she wanted to hook up with a rich second generation, she would naturally know a few like-minded friends. Among them, there would even be some who had already succeeded. The person she was asking was one of her sisters who had successfully become the temporary girlfriend of a rich second-generation heir. Hearing her asking about the Chong family, the other party was obviously surprised. "Why are you asking about the Chong family?" The woman still casually found a reason. "I saw the news today and it seems that he's quite rich. I want to know more." The young lady seemed to have misunderstood her meaning, thinking that she had set her sights on the Zhong family, so she smiled and said, "You'd better not have any ideas about the Zhong family. Madame Zhong just passed away a few months ago. The position of the legal wife is still there, but the Chong group is now in the hands of the eldest daughter of the Chong family. It's not a good choice." And Wen's friend pretended to be confused and asked, "The eldest daughter of the Zhong family is in charge? Didn't the Chong family have any sons?" "Only one daughter." "Yes, Mrs. Chong only gave birth to a daughter and no son. Speaking of which, there was a joke in the Chong family some time ago." And Wen's friend hurriedly asked, "What joke?" The person on the other end said, "It seems that not long after Madame Chong passed away, Chairman Chong brought a mother and daughter back. He said that he met his true love, but who doesn't know that they are probably his mistresses?" Chapter 1594. And one perked up when she heard this. Because when she heard this, she could connect the dots with An Wen's sudden wealth. Could it be that An Wen was telling the truth? She was suddenly glad that she didn't confront An Wen rashly today. Otherwise, she might have offended her. The other side continued. They brought her back to the Zhong family's mansion. It seems like they really love her. That daughter seems to be about the same age as the eldest daughter of the Zhong family. I heard that they dote on her a lot. The eldest daughter of the Zhong family was so angry that she made a scene at home many times. She was so angry that she even went to her grandfather's house. You know the Lu family, right? They are a first-class wealthy family. And Wen's friend listened patiently. She didn't have the heart to listen to the Lu and Li families. She only cared about the mother and daughter. Hearing that the sisters seemed to be running further and further away, she had no choice but to pull the topic back. "So, the mother and daughter successfully moved into the Zhong family? Aren't they too lucky?" As soon as she finished speaking, she heard the sisters sneer. "Successfully moved in? Dream on. Do you really think it's so easy to move into a wealthy family? Moreover, she's old and has a child. The mother and daughter were in the limelight for less than 2 months, right? They were kicked out by the Zhong family. I heard that they didn't take anything with them when they left." And Wen's friend didn't listen to the rest of the words. Right now, she was only thinking that An Wen was really lying to her. She was clearly kicked out of the Zhong family, but she was still pretending to be a rich young lady and lying to her? She told the sisters that she had something urgent to attend to. After hanging up, she called An Wen. Not long after An Wen arrived home, An Yen went out to play cards. She ordered a Western meal alone and waited for it to be delivered. "Hello, Lily, what's the matter?" An Wen asked. The other side sneered. "An Wen, I really misjudged you. You were kicked out of the Zhong family a long time ago. Why are you still pretending to be a rich young lady in front of me?" An Wen's heart skipped a beat. How did she know? Before she could react, the other side had already started scolding her. "I say, why are you always so hesitant when talking about the Zhong family? If you don't have money, then don't have money. Why are you pretending? No matter how beautiful a pheasant is, she can't become a phoenix. You still have the nerve to say that you want to take me to the Zhong family. Aren't you afraid that the wind sprains your tongue? I really misjudged you. You were kicked out, shamelessly." And one couldn't help but hang up the phone. She threw the phone she had just bought onto the floor and sat on the sofa in a daze for a long time. Then, She hugged the pillow and began to cry. Half of it was because he felt embarrassed, and the other half felt that he was unlucky. It would be great if she was the real young Mississippi. Then, she would be able to live the life of an upper-class person with a clear conscience, and not rely on deceiving others and puffing herself up at her own cost. She missed the days when she was in the Zhong family. Every day, she had an endless amount of money to spend and an endless supply of branded goods. As she thought about it, she began to resent her mother again. Since she had already climbed up a big tree like Zhong Minggang, why did she have to find another man because she couldn't bear the loneliness? It was one thing for her to be unable to bear the loneliness, but she had carelessly left behind a seed. If she had been a little more careful, or a little more loyal, would she be Zhong Minggang's biological daughter? Zhong Minggang's biological daughter. Thinking of Chong Yuji's arrogant look, she was both envious and jealous. She was even more disgusted with her mother and Yen. Chapter 1595. And Yen returned home with her makeup on. She saw her daughter sitting on the sofa with red and swollen eyes. It was obvious that she had been crying. She hurriedly walked over with heartache. Wen, what's wrong? She walked to her side and sat down. Just as she was about to touch her, and Wen avoided her with a look of disgust. And Yen was stunned. Wen, what's wrong with you? And Wen looked up at the woman in front of her. She was in her 50s and had taken good care of herself. Her skin was still fair and delicate, but it couldn't hide the fine lines at the corners of her eyes and lips. Her eyes were very young, which could only be seen if she hadn't experienced the hardships of life. And Wen used to be very proud of her mother's youth and beauty. She was prettier than her classmates' parents. But now, looking at Yen like this, she was very annoyed. She said in a sharp tone, "As a woman who is about to enter old age, you dress up so beautifully every day. Are you going to seduce another rich man?" And Yan's gaze trembled. She looked at the daughter in her hands and couldn't seem to imagine that she would say such things to her. Actually, Wen regretted saying it. But that bit of regret couldn't compare to the resentment in her heart. She continued, "Do you know? Today, I was pointed at my nose and scolded. They said that I was chased out, that I was a poor woman who pretended to be a rich man's daughter. They said that I was a wild chicken who pretended to be a phoenix." The more she spoke, the more agitated she became. The tears that she had finally stopped came out again. And Wen almost cried. "Why can't I be Chong Minggang's daughter? Since you were with Chong Minggang, why did you find another man? Why did you have to give birth to me and suffer? Why do I have to suffer such humiliation when others are high and mighty while I'm just a wild child without a father?" And Yen felt her vision turn black. When she gave birth to Wen, she didn't deny that she wanted to use the child to force Chong Minggang. But after all, Wen was her flesh and blood. She really loved Wen. She spent most of the money Chong Minggang gave her on Wen. She sent her to a high-tuition private school, sent her to learn piano and dance, and took her on a trip every year. She was almost careful, trying her best to let her daughter enjoy everything that normal people of her age could enjoy. She had never known that her daughter had always thought this way. The daughter that she had carefully held in the palm of her hand actually viewed her mother in such a manner? And Yan's good mood disappeared without a trace. She didn't even have the chance to tell Wen that she had put in a lot of effort to go out today. She had given a generous gift to a madam and helped Wen get an easy and decent job. A fierce argument broke out between the mother and daughter. On the same day, Wen took her mother's card and withdrew most of the money from it. She bought a plane ticket and flew to another city. By the time Yen found out, she couldn't even get through to her daughter's phone, and Wen had thrown her phone away. Gu Shengyin and the system looked on silently. She felt that she had great foresight. She didn't need to do anything at all. And Wen and Yen, this mother and daughter pair, could make their originally good lives a mess. Chapter 1596. Gu Shengyin's days were divided between the company and her family. Chong Minggang had been waiting for his daughter to ask him for help when she was flustered. However, it turned out that he was thinking too much. A few days ago, Gu Shangyin found it a little difficult because she was unfamiliar with the company. However, she quickly grasped all the resources of the Chong Group. Her decisiveness and unique vision in the business world attracted the attention of some of the older generations. Some of the shareholders of the Chong Group had initially expressed their support for her because of the Lu family. But now, they had to admit that even Gu Shangyin had the ability and charisma to convince people. She was neither arrogant nor rash. Although she was young, Gu Shangyin's ability to make big decisions made many old foxes in the business world admire her. The Lu family was worried that their granddaughter couldn't handle the situation and was ready to save the situation at any time. However, after seeing Gu Shangyin's performance, they felt that their worries were unnecessary. Lu Qingshan, on the other hand, had a gratified look on his face. Since Yuji has such a strong ability, this old man can rest assured. Indeed, a strong family background could only make others envious. However, her own ability could make others believe in her. His granddaughter was like this now. No matter what happened in the future, she wouldn't have a bad life. As the daughter-in-law of their family, the Chong family naturally paid attention to her. Gu Shangyin had made a lot of movements during this period. The He family obviously knew about it. Old Master He expressed his admiration for Gu Shangyin's business methods. I thought she was a dignified and generous person. I didn't expect her to be so decisive when it comes to important matters. I was wrong. Although he said that, everyone could see the admiration in his eyes. He Chi was even more straightforward. I wonder if sister-in-law will be willing to come to my Huaxia group to test the water after she gets married. Many people were happy for Gu Shangyin. Obviously, Chong Minggang wasn't one of them. The stronger Gu Shangyin was, the more stable her position was. This meant that he didn't have a high chance of regaining his full power. This made Chong Minggang, who felt that he hadn't reached the age of retirement and couldn't let go of his full power, very unhappy. Every time Gu Shangyin returned home, there would be a huge argument between the father and daughter. For example, tonight. Originally, he was in a relatively cold and silent state. Suddenly, Chong Minggang put down his chopsticks and laughed coldly. I didn't expect my good daughter Yuji to be so powerful. Gu Shangyin slowly swallowed the food in her mouth before replying, "It's all thanks to father's teachings." She was not afraid of Chong Minggang at all. The current Chong Minggang was only good at talking. When it came to arguing, Gu Shangyin believed that she would not lose to anyone. As expected, Zhong Minggang was choked quite badly. He snorted coldly. I just didn't expect that my meticulous upbringing would raise an ingrate. Gu Shangyin put down the chopsticks in her hand. After being disturbed like this, she could forget about having any appetite. She had already bought an apartment near the company. It was time to have a showdown with Chong Minggang. Gu Shangyin looked at Chong Minggang quietly. "Father, don't say things like ingrate. You know best what you've done all these years." She began to tell him everything one by one. Chapter 1597. Chong Minggang had an affair with An Yen before he married her mother. But he gave up An Yen for the support of the Lu family. But they didn't stop after they got married. His marriage with her mother was unfaithful from the beginning. He had been having an affair all the time. He always thought that An Wen was his daughter. He even thought about giving a part of his inheritance to his daughter after he passed away. After his wife Lu Qinghe passed away, he had many ideas about the shares in Chong Yuji's hands. Because his daughter Chong Yuji didn't listen to him and wanted to bring back his illegitimate daughter and one to suppress his daughter, pile by pile, piece by piece. There were even some things that even Chong Minggang forgot. Gu Shangyin said them one by one. Chong Minggang's eyes gradually widened. He looked at Gu Shangyin. "You hired a private detective to investigate me?" Gu Shangyin didn't answer him. She had the system, which was much more professional than a private detective. Gu Shangyin finally concluded, "Actually, I have always admired you, father." This was the truth. Chong Yuji's feelings for Chong Minggang were no less than Lu Qinghe's. That was why she reacted so strongly to his action of bringing back An Yen and her daughter. Gu Shengyin continued, "But what did you do? Ungrateful? You used my mother's family background to develop the Chongming Group to what it is today. But from the beginning to the end, you didn't have any true feelings for her. Who is the ungrateful one? You said that you raised me carefully, but in the blink of an eye, you brought back an illegitimate daughter to suppress me. Is this love for me?" Gu Shengyin said with a sneer, "The so-called reincarnation is good. Father, I'm afraid you don't know that you have been wearing a green hat on your head for more than 20 years. You raised someone else's daughter for more than 20 years, right?" This was Chongming Gang's biggest weakness. He couldn't help but shout, "Shut up." How could Gu Shengyin shut up? She said, and Yen and her daughter were kicked out. "I thought that if this was how it was in the future, we could live a good life. But you wanted to take the shares in my hands." She sneered, "If I don't resist, do you think something will happen to me? Then you smoothly became the first inheritor of the inheritance?" Chongming Gang's temples throbbed at her sarcastic words. His vision turned black, and he couldn't help but say again, "Stop talking." He had never thought that the things he had done would make him feel unbearable when others repeated them. Gu Shengyin's expression remained calm, as if she wasn't talking about herself. "You can't take it anymore? I'm the one who has to bear all of this." Chongming Gang's vision finally turned black, and the world spun. Gu Shengyin stood up and shouted, "Call an ambulance. Father has fainted." The results of Chongming Gang's checkup came out that night, a sudden stroke caused by high blood pressure. "What will happen after he wakes up?" Gu Shengyin asked. The doctor looked at the young woman in front of him strangely. She claimed to be the patient's daughter, but there was no extra anxiety on her face. But this wasn't something a doctor like him could deal with. He said truthfully, "The patient's condition is not very good. If he is better, he can sit in a wheelchair. But it is also very likely that he can only spend the rest of his life in bed." Chapter 95. Around 8 or 9 in the evening, the last 5 chapters of the day were updated. Chapter 1598. Gu Shengyin was silent for a moment when she heard this. The doctor felt that she couldn't understand the young lady in front of her. She stood there with her head slightly lowered. She was expressionless before, but now, with the pale light of the hospital corridor shining on the top of her head, there was a feeling of extreme sadness. This was Zhong Yuji's body, feeling sad for her father. No matter how many bad things he had done to her, for Zhong Yuji, he was still the father who held her high and rode a horse when she was young. She said in a low voice, "Please do your best and use the best medicine to make him better." The doctor nodded. He had heard too many such words. Every family member hoped that their loved ones could be well. But the final result was not something that could be decided by people. Gu Shengyin saw that Zhong Minggang was pushed into the ward. She felt a little stuffy, so she went outside to get some fresh air. As soon as she got some fresh air, she met an acquaintance. Zhong Cheng's stepmother, the second wife of the chairman of the Zhong family. When Mrs. Zhong saw Gu Shengyin, she was a little surprised, but after being stunned for a moment, she put on a smile on her face. "Yuji. Ah no, I should call you Chairman Zhong now." Gu Shengyin didn't have a good impression of this woman, but she didn't hate her either. She nodded lightly, "Mrs. Zhong." Mrs. Zhong didn't care that she was too cold at all. She asked with concern, "Chairman Zhong, you came to the hospital," Gu Shengyin said. "Something happened to my father's health." Mrs. Zhong understood. She didn't say anything more. If it was said that the new chairman of the Zhong group had any relationship with her father, Mrs. Zhong definitely wouldn't believe it. If they really had a good relationship, would they use almost coercion to force him to step down? However, since ancient times, the winner was king and the loser was in the wrong. Gu Shengyin succeeded in taking the position and showed that her ability was not inferior to her father's or even slightly better. No one would say anything more. Mrs. Zhong said, "I'm here this time for our Zhong Cheng." When she said this, there wasn't any sadness on her face, only a little bit of emotion. This was one of the things that Gu Shengyin admired about this woman. She was not Zhong Cheng's biological mother, so she had never been close to her stepson. However, he had never treated him unfairly. Mrs. Zhong knew that in a wealthy family like the Zhong family, if she pretended to be protective of her stepson, not only would it be a thankless task, but many people would also suspect her motives. Therefore, from the very beginning, she had made her attitude very clear. She did not want to get close to him, and she did not treat him coldly. All these years, she and Zhong Cheng had always had an indifferent relationship, but it was also because of this that Zhong Cheng's father had always trusted her and doted on her daughter very much. When Mrs. Zhong spoke, she deliberately glanced at Gu Shengyin. When she saw that there was no expression on her face, she was relieved. Zhong Cheng has some mental problems. Originally, he was fine, but he might have been stimulated earlier and suddenly erupted. Now, the situation is not very good. When Mrs. Zhong said this, her gaze was fixed on Gu Shengyin. After all, she knew that Zhong Cheng's great stimulation had something to do with Gu Shengyin. When Zhong Cheng's father heard the news, he was so angry that he threatened to seek justice from the Zhong family. However, he was persuaded by Mrs. Zhong. Mrs. Zhong, who knew the whole story, felt that this matter had nothing to do with them. Chapter 1599. Mrs. Zhong even thought that Zhong Yuji, Zhong Cheng's ex-girlfriend, was a victim in this matter. However, Mr. Zhong, who was wholeheartedly attached to his son, had obviously lost his mind. He wanted to find trouble with the Zhong family. In the end, it was Mrs. Zhong who found out the identity of the man who injured Zhong Cheng, which made Mr. Zhong give up the idea. The He family was not someone the Zhong family could afford to offend. Even if the Zhong family gave up the plan to fight with the Zhong family, Mr. Zhong would still treat the Zhong family coldly whenever he saw them. He was different from her husband. Mrs. Zhong did not have much feelings for Zhong Cheng. In this matter, she did not have any ill feelings for the Zhong family. Therefore, she did not mind forming a good relationship with Gu Shengyin in private. If Zhong Cheng's mental state could not recover, then he would definitely not be able to inherit the company in the future. Under such circumstances, her daughter, as the only legitimate heir of the Zhong family, would naturally be able to fight for more benefits. Gu Shengyin was a little interested in what she said. What happened to Zhong Cheng? Mrs. Zhong looked around and made sure that no one was around. Then, she slowly said, Zhong Cheng's mother, as you know, divorced my husband by agreement. That woman. Her private life is a little indecent. When Mrs. Zhong said this, her expression was a little strange. Zhong Cheng's mother's matter was considered a big deal in the capital back then. She and Mr. Zhong's family were connected by marriage. Of course, they had no feelings for each other. After giving birth to an heir, they lived separately. It was not a serious matter for both sides to have a lover. Many wealthy families lived like this. However, this Mrs. Zhong was too strange. She had many strange hobbies. For example, she kept many lovers and played with them. She even recorded them with a camera as a memento. Then, once, when Zhong Cheng was only 8 years old, he accidentally saw these things when he went to his mother's villa to play. At that time, no one noticed the change in him. It was not until later, when Zhong Cheng began to be afraid of women and hated the touch of all women, that Mr. Zhong realized that something was wrong. He hired a psychiatrist for his son. After 2 years, the knot in Zhong Cheng's heart was untied. However, it was only a temporary solution. Zhong Cheng had been receiving treatment from a psychiatrist in private. It wasn't until he became an adult that he looked no different from a normal person. As a stepmother, Mrs. Zhong knew about these things, but she had to pretend that she didn't know anything. Originally, if Zhong Cheng was lucky, this symptom might not recur for the rest of his life. But it was clear that the experience of breaking up with Gu Shengyin had somehow triggered him. Gu Shengyin. Hearing Mrs. Zhong's words, Gu Shengyin was speechless. To be honest, Zhong Yuji didn't do anything that would cause Zhong Cheng's mental illness. It was normal for Zhong Cheng to be dumped. Now that he was in trouble, what did it have to do with her? Mrs. Zhong looked at her and quickly said, Of course, we all know that Zhong Cheng's illness has nothing to do with you, Director Zhong. It's just a coincidence. Gu Shengyin looked at Mrs. Zhong and smiled. Thank you for your understanding, Mrs. Zhong. This woman was a rare understanding person. Chapter 1600. Gu Shengyin went back and forth between the company and the hospital every day. When Zhongming finally woke up from the hospital bed, Gu Shengyin also received a message from the system. Su Wan and Zhong Cheng were together again. Gu Shengyin raised her eyebrows. Su Wan had gone out of town, and Zhong Cheng was receiving treatment at a local hospital. How did they meet? After the system's explanation, Gu Shengyin understood. Zhong Cheng's condition could not be treated effectively in this hospital, so Zhongming's father sent his son to a hospital in another city. There was a hospital in that city that was famous for its psychiatry department, and it might be of help to Zhong Cheng's condition. And Wan happened to be in that city. Coincidentally, when Zhong Cheng went out for a walk with his bodyguards, he met Wan, who was wandering around aimlessly. Gu Shengyin. What an ill-fated relationship. What happened after that was even more bizarre. Zhong Cheng, who refused to get close to anyone because of his illness and had violent tendencies, was actually very tolerant of Wan. This tolerance was reflected in many aspects. For example, he allowed Wan to be within a meter of him, and he was even able to have dinner with her. He even felt that being with Wan made his heart feel very peaceful. Wan did not know about Zhong Cheng's condition, and thought that he was still the same as before. She saw this as an opportunity given to her by God, and used all her means to seduce Zhong Cheng. The two of them went back and forth, and they were stuck together again. Gu Shengyin. This was not logical. She asked the system in shock, why is Zhong Cheng sick, but Wan can break the norm? The system said, I don't know either. Maybe Zhong Cheng is sick, and Wan is the cure? Gu Shengyin. This setting is really good. As she chatted with the system, she saw Zhongming's father open his eyes. Zhongming's father saw Gu Shengyin, and the argument between the two flashed in his mind. He immediately scolded, Why are you standing here and being an eyesore? Get out of here. Gu Shengyin glanced at him and dutifully pressed the bell to call the doctors and nurses in. Soon, the people from the hospital came in to check on him. At this time, the father realized that he was lying on the bed and couldn't move. His lower body didn't listen to him at all. Faced with such a situation, his first reaction was to glare fiercely at Gu Shengyin. He glared angrily and said, You evil woman, what have you done to me? Gu Shengyin lowered her eyes. It seemed that there was no way for the two of them to communicate properly. Before she could say anything, the doctor beside her couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and said, Mr. Chung, you had a stroke because of sudden high blood pressure. Now you have temporarily lost feeling in your legs. If you take good care of yourself, there is hope for you to recover. He looked at Gu Shengyin, who lowered her eyes and didn't speak. He impulsively added, During the days when you were in a coma, your daughter came to see you every day. How could there be any overnight enmity between father and daughter? Unfortunately, Zhongming's father was stunned by the news that he had a stroke. He didn't hear the rest of his words. He just moved his legs in disbelief and found that they didn't listen to him at all. He suddenly became agitated and used his hand to hammer his legs. As he hammered, he scolded, I had a stroke. I am a cripple. Chong Yuji, are you happy now? No one will fight with you for the position anymore. You win. Chapter 1601. Gu Shengyin looked at Chongming Gang and suddenly lost interest in continuing to communicate with him. She turned to the doctor and said, My father is a little emotional. I won't come to see him for the time being. Please take good care of him. She said quickly and left more decisively. Seeing her leave, Chongming Gang was even angrier. The doctor saw him like this and felt a headache. Go and get the tranquilizer. Gu Shengyin sat on the bench downstairs of the hospital. Speaking of which, her mission in this world was basically completed. All the people who had hurt Zhong Yuji didn't get a good result. And her daughter left the family with nothing. Zhong Cheng's mental illness acted up. Chongming Gang had a stroke and was paralyzed. She silently looked at the people coming and going at the entrance of the hospital and suddenly had a feeling of losing her target. Then, she felt a shadow pressing down on her head. There was a clear and distant lotus fragrance enveloping her. He-Lu sat down beside her. "What are you thinking about? Why are you so fascinated?" He-Lu reached out and held one of her hands tightly with his warm and broad palm. However, he slightly pressed his fingers and interlocked their fingers. Actually, what he didn't say was that her expression just now looked as if she had completely emptied her mind. He was a little flustered. Gu Xingyin's hand was held and a warm touch passed from her palm to her heart. The sudden melancholy and confusion just now disappeared without a trace. Her heart suddenly calmed down. She turned her head to look at the man beside her and smiled. "I miss you." Hearing this, He-Lu smiled. He was the kind of man who rarely smiled, but he looked very good when he smiled. Then, He-Lu was at the entrance of the hospital where people came and went. He didn't care about the eyes of others and gently kissed Gu Xingyin. This kiss was very light. He-Lu simply sucked Gu Xingyin's lips and stepped back. "You looked very sad just now," He-Lu said. Gu Xingyin was confused. "Did I?" Seeing her like this, He-Lu was a little relieved. He asked, "How is uncle?" He asked Chongming Gang. Gu Xingyin said, "He had a stroke. He might be paralyzed." He-Lu asked, "Should I go see him?" He was asking about Gu Xingyin. Knowing her relationship with his father, he respected Gu Xingyin's opinion on this matter. Gu Xingyin hesitated for a moment and refused. "I was just chased out by him. He's a little agitated, so it's better not to agitate him." He-Lu stopped talking. The two sat for a while before Gu Xingyin asked, "Why did you suddenly come back?" He-Lu remembered the purpose of his visit today. He looked at Gu Xingyin and said, "Because I've applied for marriage leave." At this moment, he lowered his head to look at Gu Xingyin. At the same time, Gu Xingyin also raised her head to look at him. Their eyes met. Gu Xingyin was the first to look away. "So?" He-Lu seemed to chuckle. He said, "So, we can prepare for the wedding, Mrs. He." Gu Xingyin was also amused by this statement. She said seriously, "You don't even have a proposal and you want to marry me?" As soon as she finished speaking, He-Lu pulled out a box from nowhere like a magic trick. "I've already prepared it." He opened the gift box in his hand in front of Gu Xingyin. Inside was a pair of very exquisite platinum and diamond rings. Gu Xingyin couldn't help laughing. "Why haven't I seen a proposal with a pair of rings?" He-Lu said in all seriousness, "For things like rings, of course it's better to have them in pairs." Chapter 1602. Gu Xingyin was speechless at such a unique proposal. Well, she actually quite liked it. He-Lu picked up the smaller ring. "Come on, reach out your hand." Gu Xingyin obediently reached out her hand. Wait a minute. She saw something engraved on the inside of the ring. She picked it up and took a closer look. A small Lu was quietly sitting there. Gu Xingyin looked at He-Lu and smiled. "Why didn't you tell me?" He-Lu's ears were a little red. "There's nothing to say." Gu Xingyin's face showed a smile. She obediently let He-Lu put the ring on her finger. After putting it on, she also picked up another ring and put it on He-Lu's finger carefully. On the ring belonging to He-Lu, Gu Xingyin also saw a small U in the inner circle. He-Lu held her hand, and they quietly leaned against each other. After a long time, He-Lu said, "We are already preparing at home. Yuji, are you ready?" No one answered. He-Lu looked sideways and found that the person beside him had already fallen asleep on his shoulder. There was a yellowish sunlight shining on her face through the shadow of the tree. He-Lu saw the blue shadow under Gu Xingyin's eyes. Gu Xingyin didn't have an easy time these days. She had to deal with the company's affairs during the day and come to the hospital after work. Usually, it was close to midnight when she returned home. Then she took a shower and washed up, which took a lot of time. And she had to get up early the next day. She hadn't had a good rest for a long time. He Lu looked at her quietly until that small piece of mischievous sunlight moved to her eyes. He reached out his hand and gently stopped it. When Gu Shengyin woke up, she found that she was in a strange place. The decoration style of the room was very simple and neat. Everything was placed in its proper position. Obviously, the owner of this room was a very self-disciplined man. Gu Shengyin subconsciously raised her watch to check the time, only to find that her wrist was empty. She looked around and found it on the bedside table. 6:30 p.m. She thought about it. When she met He Lu at the hospital, it was 4:30 in the afternoon. She actually slept for 2 hours? Most importantly, she was brought all the way to the bed, but she didn't wake up at all. However, the feeling of having a good sleep was indeed comfortable. Gu Shengyin got up and opened the door. An enticing aroma of food floated out from the kitchen. Just then, He Lu walked into the restaurant with a plate of food. When he saw Gu Shengyin, he smiled. "I was just about to wake you up?" Gu Shengyin looked at He Lu. His sleeves are rolled up high, revealing his muscular forearms. He's wearing a dark blue apron, which softens his temperament. Seeing that she was still in a daze, He Lu smiled helplessly. When he came out again, the apron had been taken off and the food had been placed on the table. "Don't be in a daze. Come and eat." Gu Shengyin obediently walked over and sat down. He Lu reached out and scooped a bowl of soup for her. "Come and try this." Gu Shengyin took a sip. The taste was very delicious, which was a little beyond Gu Shengyin's expectations. She praised without hiding it. "It's delicious." Then she looked at He Lu. "I didn't expect you to know how to cook." He Lu just picked up a chicken wing and put it in her bowl. Never underestimate any man who has been a soldier. A man who has been a soldier has good stamina. Chapter 100. All the updates for today are over. The second wave of updates will start in the morning of the 14th. There will be about 40 chapters in the morning. Please reward me with a subscription. Recommended 2 articles: Li Man Man, Fast Transmigration, A Guide to Abusing Scum, Stealing Fragrance in Drunkenness, President, A Good Pregnancy. Chapter 1603. Gu Shengyin obediently finished the chicken wing. It was the first time for her to go to He Lu's house, and the first time for He Lu to cook for her. But they didn't feel anything wrong at all. They seemed to have a natural tacit understanding, as if they had been together for many years just like now. After dinner, He Lu washed the fruit for Gu Shengyin, and he went to the kitchen to clean up. Gu Shengyin glanced at the man who went to work consciously. She pursed her lips and smiled secretly. "What are you laughing at?" The sofa beside her sank. It was He Lu who sat down. Gu Shengyin put a piece of honeydew into his mouth. "I'm laughing. It is said that the youngest general in the Republic is washing his hands and making soup for me. Even if I tell others about it, I'm afraid that few people will believe it." She was just joking. She didn't expect He Lu to answer seriously. "I don't think anyone will believe it." Gu Shengyin was stunned for a moment, and then she couldn't help laughing. He Lu looked at the woman who was laughing with her hands on her belly with indulgence. She was very beautiful, bright and beautiful. This kind of unscrupulous laughter was most suitable for her. Although he didn't know why she was suddenly so happy, He Lu was still happy for her. Gu Shengyin laughed for a while and then stopped. She looked at He Lu. He Lu also looked at her with his head tilted. She said softly, "Thank you, He Lu." He Lu's eyes paused. He asked her, "Thank me for what?" Gu Shengyin shook her head and buried her head in He Lu's arms. This embrace was very warm, very safe and very familiar. She took a deep breath and suddenly said, "I can't wait to be your bride." He Lu's eyes suddenly darkened. He reached out and gently stroked Gu Shengyin's soft hair. "Why do you suddenly say that?" Gu Shengyin felt very comfortable when his hands stroked her long hair. She couldn't help but rub against him. She had only slept for 2 hours in the afternoon, but now that she was full, she actually felt sleepy again. "No reason, I just suddenly feel that I really like you." Gu Shengyin lay in his arms and said with a smile. The next moment, she felt her body being flipped over. Then, he shifted his gaze and his body sank. Gu Shengyin was half lying on the sofa, while He Lu was lying on top of her. Hasn't anyone told you that it's dangerous to say such things to a man who likes you? He Lu narrowed his eyes and asked her. Gu Shengyin was not afraid at all. She reached out and took the initiative to wrap her arms around his neck, pulling him closer to her. The tips of their noses were touching, and they could smell each other's breath. Oh. Then tell me, what are the dangers? He Lu's gaze deepened. For example, losing your innocence. Gu Shengyin couldn't help laughing out loud. He Lu's words were really too interesting. He Lu looked at the woman under him. There was a smile in her eyes, and she didn't look worried at all. Are you really not worried at all? Gu Shengyin said with a smile, I'm not worried, because I know you won't do that. Such a matter-of-fact tone made He Lu's heart tremble. He asked in a low voice, Why are you so sure that I won't? You have to know that a man's self-control can never be trusted. Gu Shengyin looked at him. But you are different. He Lu, to me, you are different from anyone else. Chapter 1604. From Gu Shengyin's point of view, she could see He Lu's eyes very clearly. She could easily see He Lu's hidden desire for her. It was a very normal thing for a man to have desire for the woman he liked or even loved deeply. On the contrary, if a man could still be as calm as an old monk in such a situation, there were only two possibilities. Either he couldn't do it, or he was ruthless to you. He Lu was obviously neither of the two. He had desire, but he held it back. Gu Shengyin knew that he wouldn't do anything because she knew this man. A man like He Lu wouldn't fall in love easily. But if he really fell in love with a woman, he would hold her in the palm of his hand and put her at the top of his heart. At least, he wouldn't casually take her at such a time, in such a place. Especially when they were about to get married. As a man with a little obsessive-compulsive disorder, compared to temporary relief, what He Lu wanted more was a perfect wedding night that both of them would never forget. Hearing Gu Shengyin's words, He Lu fell silent. After a long time, he bent down and buried his head in Gu Shengyin's neck. He thought that God must have seen that he had been too lonely for so many years, so a woman like Zhong Yuji appeared by his side. She had only been with him for a few months, but she knew him better than anyone else. She could easily guess all his thoughts. She and he were a couple who were born to be compatible. As Gu Shengyin expected, she stayed at He Lu's house that night, but nothing happened between the two of them. The next day, He Lu drove her to the company personally. For the next period of time, He Lu seemed to be very busy. Gu Shengyin knew what he was busy with, so she gave herself a break. After all, it was their wedding. She couldn't really do nothing. When everything was almost ready, Gu Shengyin went to see Chongming Gang. When she entered the ward, Chongming Gang was sitting on the bed with glasses on, reading a philosophy book in his hand. He seemed to have accepted the fact that he would be paralyzed for the rest of his life. In fact, even if he did not accept it, there was nothing he could do to change this outcome. When he saw Gu Shengyin, he was unusually calm. Gu Shengyin placed the papers in her hand on the table in the ward and found a chair not far from the bed to sit down. Father seems to be in good spirits. Chongming Gang did not put down the book in his hands. Life has to be lived by itself. I still want to live for a few more years. The two of them fell into silence. Halcyon had just finished reading a page when he finally raised his head. You came to find me for something, right? He had been thinking a lot these days and had probably figured it out. It was not hard to understand why Gu Shengyin would hate her father. Putting aside the things he had been working so hard on, and thinking about the things he had done from a different perspective, Chongming Gang suddenly felt that he didn't have that much resentment towards this daughter of his. No matter what, she was his only remaining blood relative in this world. Gu Shengyin did not beat around the bush. I am getting married, father. Hearing Gu Shengyin's unfamiliar address, Chongming seemed to realize for the first time that this daughter of his had not called him father for a long time. She had always been a cold and formal father. How could he not have realized it before? Chapter 1605. He asked, "Get married? With who?" He remembered He Lu, who came to visit his family. Although he was surprised, Chongming Gang still asked, "He Lu?" Gu Shengyin nodded. Chongming thought for a while and said, "He is a good candidate for a husband, but," he paused and finally said, "as long as you are happy." Gu Shengyin sat on the chair and didn't say anything. Chongming Gang couldn't find anything to say for a while. He thought absent-mindedly, "When did I become so distant with this daughter of mine?" In the end, Gu Shengyin asked, "Are you going to my wedding?" "Father." This was the purpose of her visit today. According to her, it didn't matter if Chongming Gang, who was her father in name, went or not. But according to Chongming Yuji's thoughts, she probably hoped to receive the blessings of her family on the most important day of her life. Chongming Gang agreed. Gu Shengyin exhaled. She stood up and said, "I will come to pick you up next week." Chongming Gang nodded. He could see that his daughter wanted to leave. He wanted to say that she could sit here for a while. Even if she didn't say anything, just sitting here was good enough. But he didn't say this sentence in the end. Gu Shengyin turned and walked out of the ward. Chongming Gang looked at the door of the ward in a daze. After a long time, he turned his head and looked at the fresh flowers in the vase next to him. He lowered his head silently. Because of the true identity of the He family, He Lu and Gu Shengyin's wedding wasn't widely publicized. But although it wasn't widely publicized, it wasn't any less ostentatious. If someone with sharp eyes was here, they would find that many people who came to attend the wedding were people who often spoke on the international news. As a company that cooperated with the Chong family, the Zhong family also came. Mr. Zhong didn't come because he was busy with work. Although Mrs. Zhong felt that her husband's behavior was stupid, she couldn't persuade him. She could only bring her daughter here. As for Zhong Cheng, he was still living happily with An Wan in that small city. Mrs. Zhong arrived at the banquet hall. Although she was mentally prepared, when she saw the familiar guests, she couldn't help but gasp. With the Zhong family's status, she was considered to be a popular figure at some of the business gatherings. But here, Mrs. Zhong turned her head and whispered to her daughter, who had just reached adulthood, "Fei Fei, stay by my side later and don't be in the limelight. Our Zhong family can't afford to offend the people here." She had always been very practical when it came to educating her daughter. She had never taught her daughter to be a frog at the bottom of a well. Compared to ordinary families, the Zhong family was very good. However, in front of the real top wealthy families, they were not much different from ordinary people. Zhong Feifei was a sweet-looking girl. She glanced at the guests in the hall, nodded, and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom, I know what I'm doing." Mrs. Zhong patted her daughter's hand in relief. "Mom has always been at ease with you." She had no feelings for Mr. Zhong. The proudest thing in her life was that she had given birth to such an obedient and sensible daughter. Chapter 1606. As the main character of this wedding, Gu Shengyin naturally received attention from all directions. Many guests were secretly puzzled. Logically speaking, this bride's family wasn't ranked high in the capital. In the past, many families that were much stronger than her family had revealed the intention of marriage to the He family, but without exception, they were all rejected. They really couldn't understand why He Lu had waited for so long, but in the end, they had chosen such an ordinary rich girl. However, they would only think about this in their hearts. If they showed it on their faces, they would be fools. He Lu and Gu Shengyin didn't care about what other people thought. These people had nothing to do with their lives, so why should they care about them? The two exchanged rings and tokens. As the bride's father, Zhongming Gang sat in the front seat in a wheelchair. Next to him were He Lu's parents. Old Master He was sitting in the main seat. He came personally to let everyone see how satisfied the He family was with Gu Shengyin as their daughter-in-law. Mrs. Zhong and Zhong Feifei chose a position that wasn't very conspicuous. Zhong Feifei looked at the dazzling newlyweds on the stage and her heart was filled with envy. "Mom, Sister Yuji looks so happy," she whispered. Because of Zhong Yuji's relationship with Zhong Cheng, she and Zhong Yuji were familiar with each other and had a good relationship. Mrs. Zhong looked at the woman who almost became her daughter-in-law on the stage and sighed in her heart. In the end, it was Zhong Cheng who didn't have good fortune. She was an experienced person. She could tell that the famous General He's every move was full of care and intimacy for Gu Shengyin. This showed that the two had a good relationship. The attitude of the He family also showed that they were very satisfied with Gu Shengyin. She smiled and said to her daughter, "Feifei, in the future, you will be as happy as your sister Yuji." Zhong Feifei blushed and didn't say anything. When the guests finally left, Gu Shengyin couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although it didn't hurt to stand for a day in special high heels, it was still very uncomfortable. He Lu, who had been paying attention to his wife, quickly asked, "Are you not feeling well?" As soon as he said that, he received several mocking looks. Although most of the guests had left, He Qi and his wife, as well as Gu Shengyin's cousins, these young people had not left yet. As for Old Master He, Father He, Mother He, Chong Ming Gang, and the other elders, they left after giving the gifts. They knew very well that with them around, the youngsters wouldn't be able to let go. Gu Shengyin said calmly, "My feet don't feel well." As soon as she finished speaking, He Lu frowned and said, "I knew it. Wearing such high shoes, you must feel uncomfortable standing for a day. I asked you to change to a lower pair, but you refused, saying that they don't look good." Gu Shengyin widened her eyes. Of course, she wouldn't change it. This was the most important day in a woman's life. So what if she felt a little uncomfortable? It had to be perfect. Cough cough. He Qi coughed dryly. "I say, He Lu, your brothers are still here? What do you plan to do with us?" He Lu glanced at him. He knew that He Qi said that on purpose. He glanced at the other people's faces. As expected, they all looked like they were waiting for a good show. He Lu pursed his lips and suddenly leaned over. Gu Shengyin felt her vision change. He Lu had lifted her up in his arms. Chapter 1607. However, although Gu Shengyin was complaining in her heart, her body was very comfortable. It had to be said that being able to eat porridge made by her lover in the morning could make her feel good all day. He Lu was a perfect husband. Gu Shengyin's aunts were a little worried at first, but after coming over to take a look once or twice, they all expressed that their niece's judgment of people was simply superb. It was one thing for a man like He Lu to have a high position and power, but what was rare was that he respected and loved his wife so much. Where could she find another husband like him? Considering He Lu's vacation, the two of them didn't go on a honeymoon. Instead, they lived a sweet life in their newly built small family. Occasionally, they would be called over by their respective elders for a meal. Their wedding wasn't spread around. By the time Zhong Cheng and An found out about it, He Lu had already returned to the army. An returned to her old days. Zhong Cheng would grant her almost every request. Want to buy clothes? Want a branded bag? No problem. Want to go on a trip? No way. An didn't notice that something was wrong with Zhong Cheng. She thought that he didn't allow her to go on a trip because he liked her and didn't want her to be far away from him. She even felt pleased with herself for this. So what if she wasn't the daughter of a rich family? Looking at Zhong Cheng now, wasn't the possibility of her becoming Mrs. Zhong too high? She had tried to tell Zhong Cheng that she wanted to be with him forever. Forever. A dark light flashed across Zhong Cheng's eyes when he heard this. And one saw that he didn't have any intention of objecting. She was secretly happy and quickly nodded. Zhong Cheng hugged her with one hand and played with her hair with the other. "Okay. I'll call my father and tell him that I want to marry you." Zhong Cheng didn't hesitate at all. He felt that An was his only salvation now. As long as she stayed by his side, he wouldn't go crazy and lose his mind. When he said this, Mr. Zhong was silent for a long time. During this period of time, he had a more specific understanding of Zhong Cheng's mental condition. When he heard Zhong Cheng's request, the first thing that came to his mind was the words of the attending physician. The patient cannot be stimulated in any way in the future. Otherwise, he might not be able to wake up again. How could a person who could not be stimulated by anything become the successor of such a large group like the Zhong group? All right. Zhong Cheng smiled as he shared the news with the overjoyed An. Little did he know that his father had already decided his fate. Zhong Cheng never thought that if his father continued to treat him as the successor, how could he allow him to marry An, a woman with a dubious background? When An heard Zhong Cheng's words, her first thought was not to share the news with her mother, but to Gu Shengyin. She thought that if she returned to the capital this time, she would definitely go and see Zhong Yuji. Hadn't she always looked down on him? But now she was going to marry Zhong Cheng. In the future, Wen's identity as the young madam of the Zhong family would not be much different from that of the eldest daughter of the Zhong family. She almost couldn't wait to see Zhong Yuji's expression when she saw her. And one didn't expect that when she went to inquire about Zhong Yuji, she would get the news that she had become the wife of Major General He. Chapter 1608. It was the famous He family. She became the wife of the youngest general in the Republic. And one felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured over her head. She realized that no matter how hard she tried, there seemed to be an insurmountable chasm between her and Chongyuji. The joy of being able to marry into a wealthy family was instantly washed away. And one called her mother, An Yen, who had been looking for her, to report the good news. She thought that An Yen would congratulate her immediately, but she didn't expect to be scolded. "You child, where have you been for so long? Don't you know how worried I was about you? You didn't even answer my calls. What are you trying to do?" And Wen's joy was instantly extinguished by this scolding. She hung up the phone in annoyance. Soon, An Yan's call came. This time, her voice was full of caution. "Wen, it was my fault just now. I was just too excited when I found out about your news. Don't blame me. Where are you now?" And one said, "It doesn't matter where I am now. I'll be back soon, Mom." She said in a boastful tone, "I'm going back to the capital soon with a new identity." She told An Yen that Zhong Cheng said that he wanted to marry her, and the Zhong family agreed. When she returned to the capital, she would marry Zhong Cheng immediately. An Yen was a little worried when she heard this. She wasn't like An Wen. 20 years of being an underground lover was enough for her to see clearly how difficult it was to marry into a wealthy family. But when she wanted to say this to An Wen interrupted her without hesitation. "Don't tell me about your experience. If it was really useful, you wouldn't be unable to handle Chongming Gang after 20 years. An Yen was speechless. An Wen was feeling proud, but she didn't know that there were people who were watching her make a fool of herself. Gu Shengyin sighed aside. She knew about the hidden dangers in Zhong Cheng's body. If he suddenly had a relapse in the future, as his wife, An Wen wouldn't have a good life. Another person watching the show was Mrs. Zhong. Her husband asked her to prepare for Zhong Cheng's wedding, but added that it didn't need to be too extravagant. She instantly understood her husband's choice. After Mr. Zhong left, Mrs. Zhong called her daughter. "Fei Fei, you're probably going to have another brother soon." The Zhong family had an ancestral rule that the family business could only be passed down to males and not females. Her Fei Fei was destined to only have a small share of the assets. It was impossible for the Zhong Corporation to be left to her. Master Zhong was already so old, and it was impossible for him to have another son. It was likely that he would have to pick out one of his illegitimate children and train him as his successor. This was a good thing for Madame Zhong and her daughter. No matter which illegitimate child entered the family, as long as he was smart, he wouldn't dare to neglect her, the official wife. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that only Zhong Cheng and An Wen were happily waiting for the wedding. Gu Shengyin received an invitation. However, she did not intend to give face to this couple, so she casually found an excuse to reject them. Zhong Cheng had a bad feeling when he saw the layout and location of the wedding venue. He went to question Mother Zhong, but Mother Zhong only smiled and said, this is your father's idea. If you have any questions, go to him. And one couldn't see the problem. To her, this kind of extravagance was already a dream come true. Chapter 1609. She even tugged at Zhong Cheng's sleeve and whispered, I think this is pretty good. Why don't we leave? Mrs. Zhong still looked at them with a smile, but a trace of disdain flashed through her heart. That was why most wealthy families paid attention to matching families of equal social status. It wasn't that they really looked down on ordinary people, but families like theirs raised their children differently from ordinary people. The daughters they raised naturally had different horizons. Some things could be fought for through hard work, but some things, such as temperament and horizons, could not be nurtured overnight. If it wasn't in one standing beside Zhong Cheng today, but a young lady with a similar family background as the Zhong family, she definitely wouldn't have said such words. The reason for that was because she was able to tell that she had been slighted by Chu Feng. But An couldn't. Zhong Cheng glared at An, signaling her to shut up. He narrowed his eyes. Father, what do you mean? Mrs. Zhong didn't feel guilty at all. She really didn't play any tricks on this matter. Zhong Cheng went to look for Mr. Zhong, and An was entertained by Mrs. Zhong in the living room. She was very nervous. Even though Mrs. Zhong looked very friendly, she always had a sense of alienation from her, as if she was very far away from her. An could only force herself to remain calm. Mrs. Zhong saw everything, but she only took a sip of tea and didn't take the initiative to find a topic. As an elder, she didn't need to wrong herself to curry favor with a daughter-in-law who was destined to have no future. A faint sound came from upstairs. It seemed like the father and son were quarreling. An was a little worried. She wanted to go up, but Mrs. Zhong stopped her. It's better not to go into the study. An had no choice but to sit down. After a long time, Zhong Cheng came downstairs. An was shocked when she saw him. Zhong Cheng looked a little crazy, and his eyes even looked a little red. She quickly asked what was wrong. Zhong Cheng glanced at her and clenched his fists tightly in his sleeves, as if he was suppressing something. It's nothing. Let's go home. He held Anwen's hand. She felt a little pain, but she didn't dare to say anything when she saw Zhong Cheng's expression. That night, An received a call from her mother. Wen, let me tell you. I heard a piece of news. That Zhong Cheng. And Yen told An the news she had painstakingly gathered. What did you say? An was in disbelief. Zhong Cheng has a mental illness? She subconsciously wanted to deny it, but Zhong Cheng's crazy red eyes appeared in front of her. No, she told herself. This can't be true. What are you talking about? Who's mentally ill? A sinister voice came from beside her ear. An turned around and saw Zhong Cheng looking at her coldly. An was so shocked that she dropped her phone on the floor. When Gu Shengyin heard the news, An was already in the hospital. She was thrown to the ground by Zhong Cheng and her left forearm was fractured. This was nothing. What surprised Gu Shengyin was that An was still willing to marry Zhong Cheng. What is she after? Gu Shengyin could not understand. And Yen couldn't understand it either. When she heard her daughter's words, she suspected that there was something wrong with her ears. You still want to marry him? And Wen's expression remained calm. Why not? Chapter 1610. And Yen pointed at the wound on her daughter's body. Didn't you hear? Zhong Cheng is sick. She lowered her voice when she said this. And Yen looked at her daughter's wound and felt distressed. You haven't gotten married yet and he hit you. What are you going to do in the future? And Wen's uninjured hand was clenched tightly under the blanket. Her face was still a little pale, but her tone was very firm. So what? She raised her head and looked at Yen, her eyes flashing with a brilliance that Yen couldn't understand. If I marry him, I will be the young madam of the Zhong family. I will have an endless amount of money to spend, and I will be able to buy whatever I want. No one will ever laugh at me for being a wild chicken that wants to climb up the tree again. Her eyes were very bright, but her tone was getting more and more intense. "This is my chance, Mother. I know now that if Zhong Cheng didn't have this illness, I wouldn't have the chance to marry him. Most likely, all parents in the world would view their children as the most important thing. Therefore, An Yen tried to persuade her daughter. What if he hits you in the future?" An Wen was silent. "During the day, I will stay with the servants. At night, if he doesn't act up, he won't hurt me." This meant that she couldn't guarantee anything. Seeing that her mother still wanted to say something, An Wen shook her head. "I know. If I marry him, I might not have a good life." An Wen smiled indifferently. "But what does it matter? I'm not living a good life now. I've had enough of being calculative for half a day just to buy a dress. I won't regret it." An Yen left in the end. On the day of An Wen's wedding, she didn't appear. This was because although the Zhong family could accept a daughter-in-law who was born poor, they couldn't tolerate an in-law who was a mistress. They even hid An Wen's birth and only said that she was a poor university student from a famous brand. Gu Shengyin didn't attend the wedding, but she saw the newspaper. An Wen's face was covered with exquisite makeup and she was holding Zhong Cheng's hand happily. The two of them looked very sweet. Gu Shengyin only took a glance and turned her face away. No one knew that the bride had suffered violence the night before. Even now, under her white wedding dress, there were shocking bruises. This was the path An Wen had chosen herself. She chose to live a glamorous life in the eyes of others, so she had to swallow the bitter fruit that could not be seen by others. The system told Gu Shengyin that Zhong Cheng's condition could no longer be suppressed. He would only become more easily irritable and violent. Under such circumstances, An Wen, who was supposed to be his good medicine, had undoubtedly become his #1 target to vent his anger on. In front of outsiders, Zhong Cheng and An Wen were deeply in love with each other. However, Gu Shengyin received a message from the system every few days. An Wen was being abused again. At this time, Gu Shengyin no longer paid attention to An Wen. She knew that An Wen wouldn't have the energy to think about anything else. Sometimes, she would wonder if An Wen would regret her decision. However, this thought only flashed through Gu Shengyin's mind. Whether An Wen regretted it or not, what did it have to do with her? Gu Shengyin was pregnant. When the child in her stomach stabilized in the 3rd month, the Zhong family spread the news that Zhong Cheng and his wife were divorcing. Chapter 16:11. At that time, He Lu had already applied for a transfer, and he had been transferred to a more leisurely position. This way, he would have enough time to accompany his wife when he didn't have any missions. Seeing that Gu Shengyin was interested in Zhong Cheng and An Wen, He Lu wasn't jealous. He even told Gu Shengyin the news he had heard. "I heard that the Zhong family is in a mess. It seems that An Wen was pregnant and had an accidental miscarriage." An accident? Gu Shengyin knew that there was no accident at all. However, because neither of them had any experience as parents, An Wen didn't even know that she was pregnant. Then, Zhong Cheng abused her and made her bleed. The child couldn't be saved. An Wen had been suppressing her emotions for more than half a year. She finally couldn't take it anymore and wanted a divorce. Of course, Zhong Cheng wasn't willing. And Father Zhong, who had been looking at his son's condition for a while, didn't agree to the divorce either. In his opinion, An Wen's existence could make his son's condition better. If even An Wen left his son, Zhong Cheng's condition would probably worsen even more. As for An Wen's feelings, Father Zhong said, "You entered the family for the Zhong family's wealth back then, and now you want to leave? It's not that easy." In the end, this matter was left unsettled. At that time, it was so big that the Zhong family used their connections to suppress it. After that, Gu Shengyin rarely paid attention to An Wen's news. Once, she suddenly wanted to go shopping on a whim. That impulse came too suddenly. He Lu knew that sometimes, pregnant women's actions couldn't be understood. He could only quickly prepare the car and follow her wishes. In the bustling business district, He Lu supported Gu Shengyin in fear. He also had to pay attention to his surroundings, afraid that someone would suddenly rush out and bump into his wife. Gu Shengyin found it funny. She said, "You don't have to be so careful. How could you bump into someone so coincidentally?" But no matter what she said, He Lu was still worried. The two of them chatted and laughed, not noticing a woman standing not far away. And one stood at the entrance of a women's clothing store and looked at the two of them not far away. The woman's belly was very big, and it was obvious that she had been pregnant for a long time. She was protected by the man in a very careful and protective manner. Chong Yuji's face did not have the fatigue and sallow of a pregnant woman. On the contrary, her face was rosy and lustrous. Because she was about to become a mother, she emitted a gentle motherly glow. She actually looked even more beautiful than before. She was obviously doing well. Whether a woman lived a good life was not determined by how expensive her clothes were, but by how genuine the smile on her face was. As if sensing her gaze, Gu Shengyin raised her head and looked over. The moment she saw Wen, Gu Shengyin suspected that she had recognized the wrong person. The haggard woman in front of him, who couldn't be concealed even with heavy makeup, was Wen? Even though she knew that Wen wasn't doing well, Gu Shengyin was still surprised when she saw Wen's face, which looked like she was in her 30s. She's really getting old. Meeting Gu Shengyin's gaze, Wen lowered her head as if she had been electrocuted. Then, she turned around and left in a hurry. Wen didn't want to face such a happy Chong Yuji. In other words, she didn't want Chong Yuji to see her like this. He Lu also saw her. But he didn't recognize that this woman was Wen. "You know her?" Gu Shengyin shook her head. "We had conflicts before, but now, strangers." Chapter 16:12. After that, Gu Shengyin never saw Wen again. On the other hand, the news of Wen and Zhong Cheng's discord could no longer be suppressed and kept spreading. When Gu Shengyin's first child was 1 month old, Wen died. And it was a very tragic death. She took a whole set of photos of herself, all of them nude. But those photos weren't sexy at all, because the woman's body in the photos was covered in wounds, new and old. It was a shocking sight. Wen even wrote a suicide note, every word weeping blood, accusing the Yin family of being ruthless. She made 2 copies, one sent to the police station, and the other published on the country's most popular forum. Then, she wore her favorite designer dress and jumped down from the Zhong Corporation's headquarters. She jumped down dozens of floors and died on the spot. This news caused a huge reaction, and the Zhong Corporation's stock price fell to the bottom. With such a big impact, even if the Zhong family tried to suppress it, they couldn't. The police also took the suspect, Zhong Cheng, away immediately. Zhong Cheng confessed. In fact, the evidence was conclusive, and he couldn't deny it. But Zhong Cheng didn't receive a harsh punishment in the end. He had a mental illness. The lawyer hired by the Zhong family directly said that everything the suspect did wasn't his own intention. He just couldn't control his impulse when he was ill. After the appraisal of several mental experts, it was confirmed that Zhong Cheng did have a mental problem. In the end, the Zhong family compensated Yen, who was crying her eyes out, with a large sum of money and sent Zhong Cheng to a mental hospital. Yen took the money and disappeared somewhere. This matter came to an end just like that. When Gu Shengyin heard this news, she only said, "Oh." Then, she glared at He Lu and told him not to talk about this topic in front of her son. He Lu obediently admitted his mistake, then leaned over and kissed his wife and son on the cheek. The little guy in Gu Shengyin's arms giggled. He obviously liked this kind of game and waved his arms to play with his father. He Lu took the child, and Gu Shengyin sat by the side with a smile, watching the father and son play happily. Those irrelevant people and things were far away from her life. She only needed to care about the adult and the child in front of her. It was enough for the people who loved her and the people she loved to be safe and happy. Gu Shengyin and He Lu had a son and a daughter. The son was sensible and filial, and the younger daughter was spoiled by the family like a little princess. He Lu often smiled and said that there were 2 princesses in the family. One was Gu Shengyin, and the other was their daughter. Gu Shengyin was indeed spoiled by He Lu, even when they were 60 years old. They went shopping hand in hand. Every time he went out, he would report his whereabouts. Lu remembered all her preferences, and every year, he would surprise her birthday. Until the last year, he lay on the hospital bed, unable to move anymore. It's a pity, Yuji. The white-haired Lu leaned on the pillow and smiled at Gu Shengyin, who was sitting by the side, and said, I secretly planted a pond full of lotus this year, and the flowering time is on your birthday. Unfortunately, it seems that I can't accompany you to see it. He always remembered that she once said that she liked lotus the most. However, Gu Shengyin never told him that she loved lotus the most because of him. Gu Shengyin smiled and said, I'll wait for you to get better, and then we'll go see it together. Lu's eyes couldn't see clearly, but he still smiled and said, Okay. When their child came in, he saw his father lying on the bed peacefully, and his mother seemed to be tired, lying quietly beside him. When he walked in, both of them were not breathing. Chapter 16:13. Gu Shengyin slowly opened her eyes in this space. The system was quietly floating in front of her. She walked down from the bed. As she walked, the entire space, everything, the room, the bed, the sofa, everything turned into a blur and disappeared. The entire space returned to its original state, pure white. Except for Gu Shengyin and the system, there was nothing else. Gu Shengyin's eyes flashed with excitement and expectation. System. Her voice had a hint of nervousness. The system's white light kept flashing. Host, you can try now. Gu Shengyin did not say anything. With his palm facing upwards, a jade-green ray of light appeared. In this light, a small green bird gradually took shape. When the light dissipated, the small bird pecked Gu Shengyin's palm twice, and then flew happily in this space. Looking at its figure, Gu Shengyin's face flashed with pure joy. It is a complete life. The moment she said this, something seemed to fall from the endless void into Gu Shengyin's body. She felt the power in her body become more solid and strong. Even without the system's reminder, Gu Shengyin stretched out her right hand, put her index finger and middle finger together, and drew in the void in front of her. A huge, pitch-black crack appeared in front of her. This was a crack in space. Gu Shengyin knew that if she wanted to leave this space, no one could help her. The only thing she could do was to open a path from the void and walk out. The system had told her that when she was able to walk out of the spatial crack that she had created, she would know the truth of everything. Before she entered the crack, Gu Shengyin felt the power of destruction from it. This was not an easy path to tread. The system said, with the host's current strength, it is very difficult to resist the storm from the crack in space. It is recommended that the host increase her strength first before trying. No. Gu Shengyin rejected the system's suggestion. I can try first. No matter if I succeed or not, I have to try first. How difficult is it? Gu Shengyin said and stepped in without hesitation. As soon as she took a step forward, it was as if she had activated some kind of signal. In the originally still space crack, there suddenly began to be a gust of wind, and countless gravel and soil rushed towards Gu Shengyin. The wind was as sharp as a knife, and the small stones were heavier than a mountain. Gu Shengyin only felt that her body was heavy. However, after pausing for a second, she stepped her other foot into the hole. Her entire body disappeared into the black crack. The system did not follow in, but the white light on its body flashed even faster. Gu Shengyin could not see, but in the system's vision, it could clearly see Gu Shengyin's current situation. After walking in, Gu Shengyin realized that the space crack was not as dark as it looked from the outside. There were multicolored streams of light moving about in this messy space, enough for people to clearly see the situation inside. Chapter 16:14. Everything here seemed to have defied common sense. Gravel floated in the void, and endless astral winds were produced in the void. Gu Shengyin looked down, and she seemed to exist in the void. The scene under her feet was exactly the same as the scene above her. There was clearly an endless void under her feet, but she seemed to be stepping on solid ground. All of this felt very novel. But in the midst of novelty, there was often endless danger. The moment Gu Shangyin entered the space crack, the power in her body automatically formed a transparent shield around her, protecting her whole body. Those astral winds and gravel could not reach her, but Gu Shangyin could clearly feel the power contained in them. It was very powerful. Gu Shangyin was very clear that if she had just been born, she would have been turned into dust on the spot if she encountered such power. There was no path in the void. But Gu Shangyin seemed to be guided by something, and she walked forward in a direction. Since there was no path, she naturally could not see the end. Gu Shangyin did not know how far she had to walk to get out of this space crack, but she knew that as long as she walked forward, there would definitely be an exit. As long as she walked to that exit, she would know everything, including finding that man. Her steps were very slow. It wasn't because she did it on purpose, but because the astral winds and gravel from the void, as well as the invisible pressure, were hitting her like a huge mountain. She had no way to speed up and walk forward. Moreover, with every step she took, Gu Shangyin could feel that the pressure from the void was increasing. Every step she took was more difficult than the previous one. After walking for an unknown period of time, she knew that she had reached her limit. At this time, her clothes and sleeves had already been torn to shreds by the astral wind that had penetrated in. Her hands had also been cut with streaks of blood. Her breathing was somewhat stifled. She lifted her feet, but there was no way for her to take another step forward. Gu Shangyin raised her head and looked ahead. There was still nothing there, and no one knew how far it was. Gu Shangyin didn't know either, but she could feel that there was no exit in front of her. This road was very, very long. She stopped walking, turned around resolutely, and began to walk back. She had never thought that she would be able to walk out of here in one go. After experiencing the oppressive and destructive forces that were getting stronger and stronger, the way back became extremely easy. The pitch-black spatial crack had always existed in this pure white space, becoming the only color in this space. Until Gu Shangyin stepped out of the room. The moment she left, the black crack disappeared without a trace. The space in front of Gu Shangyin turned into a void again, as if the previous devouring crack had never existed. However, Gu Shangyin lowered her head and looked at her sorry appearance. All this proved that everything just now had really happened. With a thought, she changed her clothes in an instant, and the wound on her arm healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. It seems that I still have a long way to go. She sighed softly. Looking back at the system, which had been guarding the same place, Gu Shangyin's gaze softened. Continue to complete the mission system. Yes, host. Chapter 16:15. When Gu Shangyin woke up, she felt that her surroundings were very noisy. She subconsciously shouted, "Be quiet." Sure enough, the surroundings quieted down. Gu Shangyin woke up. She raised her head and looked around. She realized that she was in a classroom. The students around her were all looking at her. Looking at the lively scene, it should be the end of class. After class, others were chatting while she was sleeping. She even yelled at others. Gu Shangyin was embarrassed. She decisively pretended to be sleepy and turned to face the wall to sleep. System, transfer memory, she said. Soon, she knew the plot of this time. The original Mo Bay was the school hunk of Chuan Nan First Middle School. That's right, the original Mo Bay was the school hunk. If Gu Shangyin wasn't sure that this body of hers was that of a real woman, she would have been shocked. What happened next made her feel helpless. Mo Bay's mother gave birth to a boy and a girl, a pair of twins. The older brother was Mo Bay and the younger sister was Mo Bayen. 3 months later, the older brother, Mo Bay, died of a high fever. Mo Bay's mother was a very typical old-fashioned woman. She favored boys over girls and was afraid that she would lose her status in the family without a son. Coupled with the death of her son, whom she had high hopes for, she might as well go all the way. She concealed this matter and lied to the public that the one who died of a high fever was her daughter, Mo Bayen. Then, Mo Bayen became Mo Bay. Mo Bay was raised as a boy. Mo Bei's mother was very strict with her. When she was in kindergarten, she even sternly warned her not to go to the toilet with other children. Mo Bei listened to her mother, so her identity was never discovered. It wasn't until junior high that she learned the difference between boys and girls. She ran back and asked her mother why she was different from what the book said. Mo Bei's mother answered her like this: "Your brother is dead, so you have to live in his place. Remember, don't let others know that you're a girl. Otherwise, you and I will be kicked out of the Mo family." The young Mo Bei didn't quite understand these words, but she still felt sad because of the meaning behind her mother's words. She was living in her brother's place. She also did not understand. Her father clearly doted on her very much, but her mother said that her father would chase them out. However, she was still very obedient. She didn't tell anyone about this, including her father, who loved her dearly. In the second year of junior high school, her mother got pregnant again and gave birth to a younger brother. Mo Bei's mother's attitude towards her son was completely different from her attitude towards Mo Bei. Mo Bei had never seen his mother look at him with such a gentle gaze, and he had never heard his mother tell him bedtime stories. Compared to her younger brother, she did not seem like her mother's child at all. But at this time, she wouldn't ask anything. That was until he entered high school. Mo Bei, who already had a mature ability to think, slowly understood why his mother had done that all those years ago. She had raised him as a son only to consolidate her position in the Mo family. She had always been thinking about her brother, who had only lived for 3 months in this world. Mom doesn't like her. She was even certain that if her mother could choose between her and her brother to die, that person would definitely be her. Chapter 16:16. By the time Mo Bei found out about this, it was already too late. She had lived as the son of the Mo family for 17 years. Whether it was her father, her younger brother, or her teachers and classmates, everyone thought that she was a boy. Mo Bei didn't even know how to tell her father that she was actually a girl. She was sure that her father loved her. It was because of this that she cherished her father's love even more. She was afraid that she would receive a disappointed look from her father after the matter was made public. As for Mo Bei's mother, after giving birth to her youngest son, she put all her heart and soul on him. She didn't care about the daughter that she had made into this state. She was so cold that it made one's heart turn cold. After a period of confusion and helplessness, Mo Bei simply chose to give up on himself. He began to let loose in school, flirting and fighting in school. Every time she saw her father's disappointed look, she felt extremely guilty. However, after her guilt, she gave up on herself even more. She had no idea how she was going to go on in the future. Was she really going to keep this a secret for the rest of her life? Before Mo Bei could think of a solution, she provoked someone that she shouldn't have. The school belle, Yu Qingyue. Yu Qingyue was a very beautiful girl. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been called the school belle in Chuannan First High School, which was known to be full of beauties. Yu Qingyue and Mo Bei met at a basketball game. Mo Bei was handsome and agile. He had always been a member of the school's basketball team, while Yu Qingyue was the school's manager. In the beginning, the two of them were just ordinary friends. Yu Qingyue had always held a trace of unclear feelings towards Mo Bei. In fact, it was very normal. In the pure school days, the little thoughts that sprouted in the minds of boys and girls were basically based on looks and studies. At that time, Mo Bei was still a cold, arrogant, and unapproachable top student. This kind of boy was the most sought after by girls in school. Later on, Mo Bei realized that he was a person who had been deceived and abandoned by his mother. He began to let loose. He dyed his hair and pierced his ears. He was no longer as cold as before and became obedient and evil. If it was a sloppily dressed and unimpressive-looking boy, he would probably be scoffed at by many people. But when the person who did this was Mo Bei, who came from a good family and had exquisite and handsome looks, the girls who looked at his face felt that the previously aloof school hunk was very handsome, but now that he had become devilishly charming, he was even more charming. Yu Qingyue was captivated by this side of Mo Bei. She mustered up her courage and confessed to Mo Bei. At that time, Mo Bei's mind was at its most chaotic. Normally, she would have rejected Yu Qingyue without hesitation. But at that time, she was at a stage where she hated everything around her. Hearing Yu Qingyue's confession, she actually didn't reject it. However, she didn't accept it. She just didn't explicitly reject it. It was this vague feeling that made Yu Qingyue unable to extricate herself. When Mo Bei finally came back to his senses and saw Yu Qingyue, he planned to ask her out for a chat and reject her. However, Yu Qingyue was not as easy to talk to as expected. When she heard Mo Bei's words, she instantly felt that she had been fooled. Yu Qingyue's background wasn't simple. She slammed the table and stood up on the spot, saying that she wouldn't let her off. Chapter 16-17. Mo Bei did not take Yu Qingyue's words to heart. In her heart, Yu Qingyue had always been a sweet and gentle girl. She did not think that he would do anything to her. However, she had been too naive. After school that afternoon, she was stopped by a group of gangsters. It turned out that Yu Qingyue's identity was not like what her classmates thought. She was just a simple rich girl. Her father was the leader of the underground kingdom in Chuannan City. She went home crying and said that she had been dumped. She asked her brother to stand up for her. Yu Qingyue knew her limits. She did not tell her father about this and only told her brother. She was still a kind person. She only asked him to teach Mo Bei a lesson and not to hurt anyone. Her brother didn't think much of it. He just casually ordered a few people to teach that Mo Bei a lesson. Unfortunately, the gangsters wanted to show off their abilities in front of young Master and young Mississippi. They stopped Mo Bei and beat him to death. Amidst the chaos, Mo Bei's head hit the wall, and he lost his life just like that. Gu Shengyin felt a headache coming on after reading the whole story. She lowered her head and looked at herself. Ripped jeans and a black leather jacket. It was obvious that Mo Bei had started to let himself go. "What time is it now?" Mo Bei asked the system. The system replied, Mo Bei met Yu Qingyue in the afternoon to have a showdown. If nothing goes wrong, the host will be stopped after school today. Gu Shengyin. She felt a headache coming on. To be honest, this story had nothing to do with Yu Qingyue. She felt that she had been tricked and wanted to teach the scumbag a lesson. This was not a big deal. It was just that this lesson went wrong and the person who was taught a lesson died. It could only be said that fate made a fool of people. "System, draw a skill," Gu Shengyin said. On the desk in front of her, a white light that no one could see flashed. Then, something appeared in Gu Shengyin's mind. "Congratulations, host. You have received Training Basics." Gu Shengyin's eyes lit up. She stared at the system without blinking. "I've realized that I'm liking you more and more, system." She even suspected that the system had cheated for her. Body tempering basics was a very basic body tempering technique in the world of sword cultivators. Even though it was called a foundation, it was only relative to sword cultivators. After all, if one cultivated this technique to its peak, they could even reach the realm of breaking boulders with their bare hands. Of course, in this modern world where martial strength was relatively low, the power of this body-refining technique would be greatly reduced. Gu Shengyin felt the strength in his body, which was only slightly stronger than ordinary people, and his body was more agile. But it was enough. At least, Gu Shengyin felt that she would not be so passive in a fight. Gu Shengyin, who was in the midst of her joy, did not notice that the system's white light had strangely stiffened for a moment when it heard the words "I like you more and more." The system remained silent and hid in a corner. It expressed that the host's words really made the system tremble. It did not want to be blamed for some random jealousy. Chapter 16-18. Gu Shengyin's deskmate, Chen Jun, was chatting with the people behind him. He turned around and was about to take a sip of water when he saw Gu Shengyin's joyful smile. He was stunned by this smile. Mo-Bei was very good-looking. Chen Jun had always known this. Otherwise, he would not have become the school hunk of South Sichuan. Mo-Bei's good looks were not the typical sunny and handsome kind of boys. Instead, his facial features were so beautiful that they could be called exquisite. He was like a handsome young man who walked out of a Japanese manga. It was just that Mo-Bei was too cold in the past, and recently, Mo-Bei was too strange. This was not the first time Chen Jun saw Mo-Bei's smile, but in the past, he always felt that there was something heavy under his deskmate's smile. The corners of his mouth were curled up in a smile, but his eyes were haunted by a sinister aura that wouldn't go away. This was the first time that Chen Jun had seen such a pure smile on Mo-Bei's face ever since they became deskmates. A happy smile appeared on the young master's clean and bright face. Even his eyes seemed to be shining like stars. Chen Jun suddenly felt his face turn red and his heart beat faster. He turned his head away in a panic and took a big gulp of water to calm the sudden heat in his heart. I finally know why this guy is so popular with girls, Chen Jun thought. With such an appearance, even men would be shaken for a moment. Chen Jun was sure that he was straight, so he could only blame the other party for being too attractive. Have you done your homework? A voice suddenly came from Gu Xingyin's side. Gu Xingyin looked up at the boy beside her. He was wearing a pair of glasses and had a delicate face. He looked very gentle. A name flashed in Gu Xingyin's mind: Chen Jun, Mo-Bei's deskmate. Their relationship was average. But homework? Gu Xingyin was dumbfounded. Chen Jun sighed when he saw the blank look on his deskmate's face. It's the 7th period. The math teacher will definitely check your homework. If you don't do it, you'll be punished again. One after another. Clearly, Mo-Bei had been treated like this before. Chen Jun didn't know why he suddenly opened his mouth to warn Mo-Bei. Although he and Mo-Bei were deskmates, their relationship was no different from strangers. Perhaps his smile just now was too contagious? While Chen Jun was still in a dilemma, Gu Xingyin had already recalled the signature Mediterranean hairstyle and the typical serious face of a math teacher. Looking at the dazzling white summer sun outside, Gu Xingyin decisively reached out her hand to Chen Jun. Lend me your homework. Ah! Chen Jun was still in a daze. I'll copy it. During math class, Gu Xingyin was indeed given special attention. However, she handed over the workbook in her hand with a smile. The math teacher looked at it suspiciously a few times. After confirming that it was her own notes, he nodded in satisfaction. It was rare for him to praise her, and he began the lesson. Gu Xingyin heaved a sigh of relief and began to stare blankly. After school, Gu Xingyin said to Chen Jun, I have something to do today. I'll treat you to milk tea tomorrow. Thank you. Hey. Chen Jun wanted to say something, but Gu Xingyin had already disappeared. Although she had the skills provided by the system, Gu Xingyin still chose to take a different route. After all, it was better to avoid a situation like one against many. Unfortunately, the plot didn't allow her to hide whenever she wanted to. Gu Xingyin looked at the people surrounding her and couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 16-19. She carried her backpack with one hand and looked at the people in front of her. She frowned and said, What do you want? The leader was a young man with a buzz cut. He was wearing a hip-hop shirt and had a cigarette in his mouth. The people around him were all dressed in the same way. It was obvious that they were hooligans. However, although they tried their best to pretend to be ordinary hooligans, Gu Shengyin could tell their background from how they blocked all her escape routes without batting an eyelid. Normal gangsters wouldn't be as orderly as this. The buzz-cut young man spat out the cigarette in his mouth and stepped on it in a very appropriate manner. You are Mo-Bei? The buzz-cut young man looked at Gu Shengyin from head to toe. After sizing him up, he had to admit that this kid was quite good-looking. It was normal for girls to like him. It was no wonder that Missy would fall for him. However, he dared to play with Missy's feelings. He had not seen many people who did not care about their lives. The buzz-cut young man said lazily, "What do I want? Of course, I want to beat you up." After saying this, he did not waste any more time and directly raised his hand. "Go, don't cripple him. Don't care about the rest, just beat them up." Gu Shengyin reacted quickly. She swung her backpack with one hand and flipped the person who attacked her from the left. Then, she threw her backpack and began to beat them up. This group of people was not too much. At least they were bare-handed. If they had knives on them, she was afraid that she would not be able to escape today. "Hey, you have some skills." The buzz-cut young man's eyes lit up when he saw Gu Shengyin's moves. However, although his eyes were bright, he did not relax his hands at all. 1 against 12. Even though Gu Shengyin's body had been strengthened and her movements were much more agile, it was inevitable that she would be injured. However, she was only injured. The people opposite her were the ones who were screaming miserably. A total of 12 people were almost all thrown to the ground by her. They lay there crying for their parents. The buzz-cut young man was not spared either. He was half squatting on the ground, clutching his stomach. The dull pain was still there, making it impossible for him to straighten his back. From the looks of it, Gu Shengyin, who was leaning against the wall, only had some bruises on the left side of her face. She had the upper hand. "You can do it," the man with the buzz cut said. Initially, when he saw Gu Shengyin's frail body, he thought that she was just a weak student. He did not expect her to be so good at fighting. Looking at Gu Shengyin like this, a feeling of admiration arose in his heart. Gu Shengyin saw that there was no malice in his expression. She heaved a sigh of relief. She knew that people like them who mingled in the underworld paid the most attention to ruthlessness. Their reasoning was also very crude, but they admired those who could fight. Only when both sides were convinced could they have a good chat. She didn't answer the buzz-cut man's question. Instead, she asked calmly, "Now, can you tell me why you're bothering me?" The man with the buzz cut didn't hide anything. "Who told me to provoke our miss? Do you know Yu Qingyue? She's our miss. You played with her feelings. If we don't beat you up, how can our miss feel at ease?" Actually, the man with the buzz cut said this out of helplessness. He did not intend to hide this from Mo Bei. According to their words, even if they beat you up, they had to let you know why you were being beaten. However, the development of the situation was somewhat different from what he had imagined. Chapter 16:20. The man with the buzz cut had originally imagined that he would lead his men to beat up this gigolo and then say domineeringly, "Remember, this is the price you have to pay for offending our missy, Yu Qingyue." Then, he would leave suavely. However, it was obvious that the person he was looking for now was not the right person. His domineering declaration could only turn into an unimposing clamor. Gu Shengyin already knew what they were here for. She had only asked this question to ensure that things would go as planned. She thought for a moment and said, "Tomorrow, I will personally look for your missy and make things clear. The next time you do this, I will look for the police to solve the problem." After she finished speaking, she walked to the side and picked up her bag that had been thrown on the ground. She patted the dust off it and left suavely with one hand behind her back. "Police? Police, uncle?" The man with the buzz cut was shocked by this address. He had seen how ruthless that kid was when he beat people up. Now that he heard her address him as police uncle, he felt a strange chill in his heart. However, before he could finish feeling disgusted, the familiar sound of a police siren came from afar and was getting closer. "Damn it! Who called the police? Why are the police here?" The man with the buzz cut was shocked and started cursing. His men all said that they did not know. Although they were in pain all over, they still got up and quickly ran in the other direction before the police arrived. Although the man with the buzz cut was cursing, he did not suspect Gu Shengyin. From his point of view, since she had said that she would look for the police the next time, it was obvious that she would not do it this time. Moreover, they had started fighting from the moment he appeared. Mo Bei had no time to call the police. Gu Shengyin carried her bag and watched as the police car drove past her. Her lips curled into a smile. Of course, she was the one who had called the police. Although she had given them a good beating, it was not enough to vent her anger. These gangsters should reflect on themselves in the police station so that they wouldn't be looking for trouble all day long. As for what she had only said that she would look for the police uncle to solve the problem next time. She did not say that she would not call the police this time. After playing the word trap, Gu Shengyin felt that knowledge was power. Read more, fight less, and keep your IQ. She wasn't as relaxed as she appeared to be. Although it looked like only the corner of her mouth was swollen, in fact, during the fight just now, 2 people had kicked her knee. At this moment, there was a dull pain. Although it shouldn't have hurt his muscles and bones, there was definitely a bruise. Gu Shengyin saw her mother playing with her 3-year-old brother on the sofa as soon as she entered the house. Moe Chen's mother turned around and saw Gu Shengyin. The first thing she saw was the obvious signs of a fight on her face. A look of disgust flashed across her eyes. You fought with someone again? Mo Bei, can't you let your family save you some trouble? Your younger brother is still so young. I have to take care of him every day. Where would I have the energy to take care of you? She lowered her voice. Because she saw Gu Shengyin's gaze. Her daughter had never looked at her with such a cold and hateful gaze. Mo Bei's mother felt that Mo Bei was looking at her as if he was looking at something disgusting. Gu Shengyin really felt that this woman was disgusting. She had experienced many different worlds. In almost every world, she had experienced the selfless love of her mother. She had always felt that a mother's love was the most selfless and noble thing in the world. She had never thought that there would be such a disgusting mother in the world. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.